So, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the day, the second keynote address. The session is chaired by Professor Nishad Sedi, Honorary Director, SNCWS Jamia Millia Islamia, co-chaired by Farhana Salam, PhD Scholar, SNCWS Jamia Millia Islamia. Uh, Professor Nishad Sedi is Honorary Director of the Sarojini Naidu Centre of Women's Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia, a professor of English, and the former head at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia. Professor Zaidi has authored, translated, and edited more than 20 books and has successfully supervised numerous PhDs. Some of her recent publications include The Vernacular, Three Essays on an Ambiguous Concept, published by Routledge in 2023, Ocean Method with Dilip Menon, published by Routledge in 2021. We have numerous publications by Professor Ma'am in her name. It's like really a lot of the books that she have published, and including articles and papers. Uh, and she has the guest edited special issues of Manoa
That's
and the
fine.
book reviews and
That's fine.
Jamia Journal of Women's Links, published by now SNCWS Jamia Millia Islamia. Thank you, ma'am, and over to you,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much. Thank you, Hasnan. Thank you so much for this uh, very kind and generous and elaborate introduction. Um, a very good evening to all the participants and to Professor Radhika Gajjala for being with us. Thank you so much, Radhika, for your generosity, for accepting our request and being here with us, even though I know you were traveling till last night. Thank you so much. Um, Today we had a very long day, but also very enriching and very exciting. A day full of discussions, conferencing, conversations, dialogues, and presentations. We began with Professor Meena Pillai's presentation on menstrual politics in digital age. Then we had a series of presentations by young scholars who talked about subjects ranging from trans and queer and sex workers to OTT platforms. And it was fascinating to see the range of work, the topics that they covered and the kind of work that they are engaged with. Then we had two wonderful speakers who talked about from different parts of the world and working on different locations. So one from King's College London, who talked about neoliberal activism and its various aspects of its politics. Then we had um, Professor Firoza, who is from Puerto Rico, works with Caribbean and Latin American contexts, and she also had a fascinating presentation, and raised several very thought-provoking questions. Some of them are, I'm still thinking about, like technologies of feeling. We really need to engage with these concepts. Solidarity, refusal as solidarity. So we really had a very enriching day of discussion, Professor Gajala. And now we are happy that we are going to close the day by listening to you and the kind of influence that you have on younger scholars. I think that is evident from the fact that many presentations today refer to your work. So very warm welcome to you. And for my audience, I'm sure everyone knows her and she needs no introduction, but still, I have to do my job. Uh, Radhika Gajjala is professor at Bowling Green State University. Some of her books include Digital Diasporas, Labor and Affect in Gendered Indian Digital Publics, which was published in 2019, Online Philanthropy in Global North and South, Connecting Microfinancing and Gaming for Change, which was published in 2017, Cyberculture and the Subaltern, published in 2012. She is the editor of Women's Studies in Communication Journal. Um, she was the editor. She is the editor from 2026 to 2028. Um, and a past co-editor of ADA, a journal of gender, new media, and technology from 2013 to 2018. She has published many more works, but she's very modest in the introduction that she sent to me. So thank you so much and welcome to you. But I'm sure all my audience are familiar with your work, with you, so I really need not give many more details. Over to you, Professor Gajala.
Thank you, Professor Zaidi. I'm honored, and you yourself are very accomplished, and you have a large amount of work. Mine is just I'm just behind a computer most of the time. I also think it's very appropriate that I'm sitting in a room that I'm sure young people would recognize. On the one side is the gaming poster, and on the other side, by the way, is coming from the 70s. It's an Indonesian tapestry from when I was young and my father was there. And of course, we got media, books. So I thought I just found it interesting that it's highlighting. I'm zooming from my son's home. So I found it interesting that there is this as I talk about the transferability and translation of different material practices across platforms and across contexts, even geography in other ways. So I love that this happened, just serendipitously. Um, Today, I hope my talk makes sense, and I'm looking forward to getting caught up with everything everybody presented if there's a recording, and then we can continue our conversations. Sorry for my fair amount of informality. Um, I'm just pretty much stumbled out of a flight yesterday, and so here I am. I'm going to share a PowerPoint because it helps me keep centered. Otherwise, I get, very what do you call it? Oh, where is it? PowerPoint. What happens to me is I get sidetracked. I start talking about all kinds of. So over here, I do have a talk. Um, um, sorry about that. Did you see what? No, you can only see my PowerPoint. So I do have a PowerPoint. You can see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, we can see that. Mm.
Okay, I will make it into a slideshow in a minute. Um, where are you? Okay, where are you? View. Hmm, Give me a minute. It'll come. Slideshow. Where are you? Play from current slide. Okay. Um. So basically, I gave this long-winded title just to try to figure out how to connect what I've been doing to now. And each time I give a talk, so things concretize. So it's lovely to be able to give a talk amongst people who probably understand some of the many contexts I'm talking about. Sometimes I get audiences who get only the digital or get. So in terms of thinking about rebuilding, remembering gendered post-colonial digital archives, I'm thinking about um, various other things that have happened along the history of, we now have a significant history of digital presence beyond just computer scientists and other people where it was in a closed space for a while. So it's the digital social presence is what it is. So overarching questions in most of my research, I'll be honest, I haven't actually articulated them as this in all my writing, but it came to me as I was trying to make sense for this talk. And as I was once again returning to, I know you guys will laugh, but Calm will, to actually look for a loom and a spinning wheel there because there was something I was thinking about. So, how do practices translate? These are, I deliberately didn't call it material because there's a difference between materiality and tangibility. How do our practices, or anybody's practice, translate from and across different spaces of materiality, whether in physical, tangible place or digital place, based platforms, infrastructure, whatever. but they're also my argument is that a lot of several kinds of digital practices that we engage in are both material and tangible, although again, materiality and tangibility are a little different from each other, nuanced, and there's difference. So in such cross, again, we don't want to say they're equal or they're the same in terms of access or in terms of control or in terms of transparency of how they are, the practices are visible to us. All I'm just saying is how do they translate? Because in the translating, sometimes a lot is gained. Something is gained, something is lost. What is it that's gained? Is access speed across time and across space necessarily a gain? Or is it a loss? So these are, larger questions that we can engage depending. The way I engage with them is because it gets overwhelming if you think about it just conceptually and in the abstract. I always engage with regard to a specific context or site, and that's where the archives come in. So in such cross-spatial contexts and across time and geography and history, how does the invisibility of and the gendering of the subject come about? When I'm saying gendering, I'm not equating gender with women. I'm talking about gendering because that when we gender, we also gender men as men, women as men, women sorry, women as men, and we also talk about the gender spectrum. Which in certain places may be illegal to speak about. So, no doubt you ask, do I mean material or tangible? And so we want to think about all these kinds of questions. I just want to kind of frame my talk with these questions for you to think about. I have a set of provocations for you in this talk based on my past and continuing work. One of the questions is, uh, what is old tech? What is new tech? And why do we call these old and new? When do we call them old and new? Because I have also dabbled in field work in handloom communities where and also have a real, I guess, thriving and scattered workshop of my own with my spinning wheels and table loom and thing and little tapestry looms at home, and begin to realize that some of these things are actually newly designed tech too, but we never call them new tech. We call only digital as new tech. So we have to think about what is old tech and new tech. And then in the process of trying to think about this translation of tangibility, materiality into different contexts, of course, you and I ended up now in looking at the media in images and in the artificial intelligence, as they call it, generative artificial stable fusion, whatever you want to call it, mostly created for artists, I guess, called Midjourney. It's Gen AI, stable fusion, and all the other stuff. You can find the technical jargon online. But I went back to Second Life, which is basic. For gamers, it's pretty basic. It's not really a gaming platform, but we went there as educators about 15, 20 years ago to see how we could teach through this platform. And so that got me onto a journey then I wrote about in my book on cyberculture and subaltern mostly, and I have some articles related to that. You can check on that, where I was pretty much living there and creating digital saris along because I saw that that was a thing that people from who were from the Indian diaspora and from India also doing. And there was a lot of Bollywood. If you go back now, there isn't much of that, just some old timers hanging around. But I went back and now I call this project, which I've kind of initiated in response to thinking about this translation of material and tangible practices. I call it hashtag Why Return 2024. Let me pause here and say, if I'm running out of time, please just stop me. We can continue the conversation afterwards also. So the other insights are from the tooling around project my team and I were doing since 2019, just before the COVID shutdown, and stopped around 2022, even though I'm sitting on some archives from Twitter, because obviously 2022, 2023, I'm trying to think. No, 22, June, when we lost access to Twitter data as academics. Of course, it's no longer Twitter, and that's a whole other thing to talk about, which I won't get into now. So this work led us to an understanding of the simultaneous and coordinated workings of semiotic, visual, performative, and statistical in creating visibility. Significantly, of course, some of the data sets we used came from the 2019 protests happening right where you are right now into the in Delhi. And my students and I were watching things, of course, through the social media space, and that's what we could gather. And so the question was, how was the visibility created through social media space, through hashtag space? You can find these articles, and I would love to have a conversation with those of you who want to extend and think through some of these issues. So yeah, so we return, we move carefully sideways, but to next platforms, and basically, uh, you know, in a framework of investigation and play. To think about the postcolonial, the relationship between postcolonial subjects and the relationship we have with both past and future. Um, and I am in conversation with the several collaborators across content, across geography, of course, and one of them is Dr. Maitri Basu, who is also examining some of these questions in relation to the artificial Gen AI play. And she asked why decolonial and not postcolonial. And so we were thinking through those as well. I don't have anything conclusive right now. Of course, if you come to something conclusive, then that's the end. Somebody else. It's not the. I mean, you can't say conclusively certain things because it's constantly on the move in this terrain, right? So, um, so my co-author, my collaborator, her gaming name is misquoted, and she's been playing in Sims and all the other places. And so we called each other with our online avatar names. So she asked Claude AI about the cognitive process that informs Claude AI how to generate. And you can see that Claude is saying there's no such thing, that generative AI has no actual cognitive process. So the problem here is us. We are attributing um, agency and cognition and intentionality and other things to Gen AI, which is a tool and a flawed tool. So the question here we have to ask is, what's the hype around it and what's at stake? And there's always the economic trajectory around what it means. In the 2000s, you saw the .com boost, and you saw physical evidence of how people could enter this space and actually get jobs, well, however problematic or otherwise it might have been. But you see whole generations of young people did get some sorts of jobs, but the jobs in related to AI are invisible, and it's highly extractive because I think what's invisible is the labor that goes into trying to screen all these AI things. And that, again, the concept of cheap labor from the global south or from the poorer parts of the world, whether the global south or global north, has been something that is now explicitly sought and extracted, because that model is what worked back in the 2000s and otherwise. Um, So what appears to be connectedness is what I had argued back in my book on cyberculture and subaltern. It may be really representation. What appears to be exoticizing, on the other hand, may just be marketing for survival. And what appears as individual authentic voices are voicings, I use the term voicings, that are performed performatively through an interaction of the invisible interface design and political, economic, and discursive hierarchies that have coded, quote unquote, the subaltern as data. I'm using the term subaltern in a varying kind of a term. I'm not making it stick in terms of just the way in which the subaltern studies used it, but as a kind of a code. And I suggest you look at Sheila Roy's and Alf, I can't say his last name, their co-edited book on New Subaltern and the ways in which this has been thought through. So we aren't making it stick like 50 years, sorry, not 50 years ago, 30 years ago, but we're trying to think through what the term, because the term has become academic capital. So we don't want to use it as it means a particular kind of body, but it's still some conceptually useful to think through because there's an academic history and because people seem to understand when you throw in the subaltern in different ways. So my use of subaltern isn't meant to denigrate any parts of the population or to say, you know, subaltern quote unquote can't have access. It's about a question. It's a question. Um, and then we go back to think in terms of archives. And here were some of my archives going back in the mid 2000s and I mean, sorry, 2005 to 2008 when I was building in the world of Second Life. And over here you see that there was possible. These are not things that I built. I would kind of in that economy buy the kits and kind of unfold them. But the saris were things that I built through textures taken from actual fieldwork related fabric that I had bought or brought with me. And also some of them were just saris of my old saris. So and then there's the archives that I've been getting off Twitter, and how I can look at them. And I've looked at them through Gephi, through Netlytic, though it's no longer there. But you can also, I think, those of you who are really good at coding can also look through um, uh, the data analytic tools such as R. And but of course, Python is how you extract some of this data. You use Python to extract the Twitter data. You have certain Python scripts, and then you upload them into Gephi, or you can upload them. So here's one kind of how an archive looks. The previous one was how an archive looks. Here's the flat kind of Excel sheet archive of the same thing. And we have how the archive then appears, can be visualized. This is also part of the data sets that I had collected before Twitter disallowed the extraction. So this is also another way you can look at the archive, and this is during, I think, 2020 Women's Day, I would say March 8th, 2020, when we had the hashtag She Inspires Us go out and clash with protester hashtags. And I direct you to my team's articles to look at that, and by all means invite all of you to conversations around these. So in 2003 to 2010, I by living in Second Life, I began to understand that living online is not disembodied, but there's an affective replacement of bodies through space and time. And just because it's fun, I'm gonna play this for a second. And over here, you can see this particular character is actually me. I don't know if you guys could hear that. I could. Um, so anyway, this is coming from that time when there were all these Bollywood clubs. Again, I'm speaking, I think, to a next generation, to a next generation who probably isn't familiar with Second Life. That's the interesting thing about this, is that this is old tech. I returned. Why did I return? I returned because, as I said, for my explorations of looking at these materiality practices that translate into different kinds of practices, but seemingly similar and different in and through Gen AI and Stable Diffusion. And so the images that I started uh, moving into Midjourney were actually these kinds of images to see what they would do. And so I went back and went. There's a long history of tactility, materiality, of where the texture for this dress comes from and what it's narrating. It's narrating um, different things and then how it interacts with this particular space. So the texture itself is a 1970s batik from Indonesia when we were living there, but and now it's taking on different forms of materiality. Um, so this particular image that I had, not image, this I existence that I had kind of cobbled together with the existing infrastructures of Second Life and the material product of the batik fabric and other things available to me, and just pretty much cobbling together, because I'm neither a digital artist, nor am I a technologist, nor a software programmer, or any other kinds of things. I am pretty much tooling around, as I keep saying. So I screenshotted that and I moved that to Midjourney. You can find Midjourney by going on and looking for it if you don't know what it is. What Midjourney does is it converts, it reads the image, so to speak, if you can say it in quotes, and it converts it to it tries to describe it in text. Um, and so what Midjourney then described this as, you can see the different descriptions. I will leave it there. And so um, this is like, to quote my software engine architect son, it's like marbles in a maze. What it's basically doing is it's looking for the words, looking for the image pieces, and then connecting them to existing database of words. And so this is what we get. This is what it looks, and then we translate that. Hopefully you got to see it. If you didn't, I'm willing to share some of these things, no problem. And we can talk about it. As I said, this is all provocations, things for us to think about as a community. Um, and these are the kinds of images that Midjourney produced from what I did. Of course, as somebody who is thinking about material in a particular way, I'm very frustrated because I definitely didn't get the batik, and it looks very synthetic, but it's got its own life, its own materiality, its own um, imaging, right? So um, then I went and said, okay, let me get an image of myself, because then I don't have to take any permission from anyone. Went back, I think this was way back from when I was maybe 19 or 20, and we went to visit Belur Halebid. And I found this, and of course, the very bad kind of a shot of it, because I think the iPhone's flashlight came onto it as I took the picture. But I said, it's interesting, let me do it. And you can see what the description it's giving. It's obviously recognized some of the things, but what's interesting, of course, is that it recognizes things like Fujifilm, And then it connects it to various kinds of artists, because this is a platform for artists mostly. And what then happened was interesting to me, in the sense that what it produced was different iterations of women against the background of course, mostly Hindu sculptures, because obviously that was a Hindu temple from Belur. And so this allowed me to think through in different ways of different possibilities, and what is the what are the stories that we tell, and what are we told. So yeah. So basically I went through this. You can see the different screenshots there. So the question then becomes for me is like, what am I doing with all this, right? Where am I going? Why am I doing this? Um, so part of it is, what would a feminist remediation look like? Um, then we go back to thinking in terms of, 1993, when Rajeshwari Sundarajan talked about the fact that, when we as feminists look at things, we're looking for a certain kind of feminist subject or subjectivity. We're looking for a particular kind of feminist agency. Are we missing something by looking singularly in this way? She may not have said that. I'm saying that. Um, in any case, I started to look around at AI experiments by artists, or a craft. This is a craftsman, I think, from India, and what they're doing. And I won't draw any conclusions because I don't have sufficient information, or I haven't, about either the offline person doing this, or the number, because I think, as you know, as you all know, our search algorithms are pretty much biased in themselves, because we see what we've looked at often, and it might just be that there's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm just seeing certain kinds of goddesses, and I'm not seeing certain other things. So I don't want to come to any conclusion based on this. I'll just put this out as a product, and we can talk about it later. Again, it's a provocation. So I think you won't actually be able to see it, because it's a link, and it's not linked in the way that the other things are. But feel free. This artist, I think, is, let me just say, this artist is Jprint. So if you wanted to go on Instagram to Jprint, Jay Prints, you can. Because I went there, I was like, I wanted to see in the current context of how Gen AI might be used to, again, within certain agendas, implicitly and explicitly, because it's a cultural term, a cultural agenda. It's not necessarily a intentional agenda sometimes. I went looking for how historical artifacts, historical buildings are being portrayed, and there's a whole bunch of things, and different things that play in with the current ways in which history is being re-narrated in the name of decoloniality. And so I did find that J Prince also had some had very interesting AI reconstructions of, for instance, how Taj Mahal was built. Again, go to J Prince, you can see them. Um, so while we kind of we cannot, as human beings, engage anything without actually making it a part of us, making meaning. And this is why we do cultural studies. We look at the importance of how culture is formed through these various artifacts. This returns me to, of course, Roland Barthes, when he talks about, once I write, it is the text itself, which fortunately this possessed me of my narrative continuity. And I can't help think about this quote over and over again. I'm giving you time to read it. As I look at the kinds of texts that are being produced, in thinking it, and then we tear ourselves apart thinking, is this intentional? Is it unintentional? What's going on here? Including, of course, what we see through the algorithm. And then we say this is evidence of this or that. But then the algorithm, of course, is showing us what we are tending towards. How do we interact with the interface is very important as well. So, as Divyaduti Roy says, let's not imagine that the web was always a great autonomous space and that suddenly it became clustered with control with AI. It's been an infrastructure. It is an infrastructure. It is not a free space, and we know that now more than ever with the changing uh, ways in which different platforms that for the past 10 years people assumed was democratic or otherwise. Um, so the point then is that it is not interpreting, it is reflecting back. So how does this kind of cognitive process inform? And so we went back to this exchange. Midjourney itself doesn't understand images in any human sense. It matches it, and this is what I was showing you throughout. So I'll just leave the slide up there for a second for you to look at. Um, and I'm trying to see, there are some messages. Yeah, I think there are some messages coming here. So we can actually have a conversation maybe as I stop. But these are, I'm going to talk about the different ways in which the reason I went back to what little I could do is that you can actually see some things when you're building in a place like Second Life, but you can't actually see some things when you're building in a place that you're trying to generate through AI. This goes back to predates to the GUI interface. It predates the graphical user interface, which is GUI, when we used to have text-based worlds that we used to create. So I wanted to share that as a particular world creation mode. So before we rush to celebrate agency or point to a lack of voice through AI, we need to remember that all that our remediated does is resituate. It's never outside of hierarchies of power, and it's never totally devoid of individual intervention. It's a key point. So basically what I'm trying to say is mediation histories matter, and we try to jump to the latest newest thing without thinking about the long history of media. If we're seeing a particular kind of quote unquote bias in any representation, we also probably need to go back to photography and think about how darker skin people that the basic chemicals and the basic lenses were never developed for darker skinned people. And so that non-negotiation continues, right? Remediation itself is situated. So I'm going to leave that at that, and you've got a lot to think about. I'm going to stop it. And so it looks like there's lots of questions in the chat. I'll let whoever's moderating decide how I should do this. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Gajala. That was fascinating. And you really left us with so many provocations and questions that are also urgent and pressing. And half the time, most of the time, we talk about them without really understanding them fully, or without really understanding the full implication of what we are saying or what we are talking about. You began with a very kind of challenging question, which is about practices as they translate from and across different spaces of materiality. Now, that is something, that we all talk about, but then we really don't understand, because when yeah, we don't understand. That's true. And then the second point that you raised and that I'm still thinking about is about how digital spaces are not disembodied spaces, because we assume that there is total disembodiment, and these are objective, impersonal, but these are not embodied spaces. In fact, they are effective replacement of bodies through space and time. Now, this is again second provocation that really hit me, and I'm kind of constantly thinking about it. And then you talked about subaltern, And the last point that you made, that is also something that we all need to think about. And I think some of the presenters, many presenters, in fact, directly, indirectly, did take up this question of mediation. We think of AI as a liberating space on the one hand, on the other hand as taking away all the human agency, and therefore technology controlling us. But you very rightly pointed out that it is not producing. AI is not producing, it is only reflecting what is given to it, because after all it is pre-trained models. So thank you so much for raising all those questions. And I'm sure, because this is young researchers conference, these young researchers who deal with technology on daily life, on daily basis, much more than all of us. I feel like dinosaur when I look at them and their work. So yeah, so I will ask the rapporteurs to take up the questions from the chat box. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. Hello, I'm Vishakha, the PhD scholar from Jamia Millia Islamia University. Ma'am, there are such a long series of questions. So I really want to ask if I read all the questions which is asked by the scholars from our
No,
depart
no,
from the
you
department.
read one by one, because all these questions, I'm sure, will give us a chance to listen to
Right.
Professor Gajjala a little at length.
Yeah. And
Sure,
then
ma'am.
you're free to contact me as well.
Sure, ma'am. So I'll start with the first question. Question is, some critics argue that online philanthropy promotes collectivism, where people engage in low effort, feel good donations without deeper involvement in systemic change. In your view, how can digital giving be designed to foster sustained civic engagement rather than just momentary generosity?
First question is, why are we expecting digital giving to solve all the problems that we've not solved in other ways? And of course, there's collectivism. Anywhere there is superficial activity in any space, there is also a we perform the idea of generosity even in an in-person space. So I think a question for me would be, why are we focusing on the digital as somehow going to be our salvation space? And why does it matter? And maybe it does matter that it promotes its ease of access, maybe, or particularly for your generation, but more than back in the 90s when we were arguing that access was difficult. But but what does this whole phenomenon itself produce is another question you could ask. So there are many things. I mean, but in terms of the binary of this, how can digital giving be designed to foster sustained civic? Why are we even asking this question? Why do we want this digital to fix this? Why aren't we asking this question about how can we do this? How can we do this in our everyday lives? How can we do it in other spaces? Why? I mean, as researchers, we might want to ask this. Maybe you have a thesis you want to write about this, but this question itself closes the answer off to my thinking, because then it's privileging digital. We're not asking what do we mean by digital. So I just want to kind of, again, provocation. Thank you.
Oh, wow, ma'am. How insightful. Now there is a question by another delegate. Could you speak to the changing landscape of memory and memory making in digital landscapes like the archives you mentioned, or the different iteration of Vedic patterns created when digitality comes into play?
That's a that I can if you can give me answers to that, I would love that. I think again, it's what's at stake. I think the temptation is to say that the memory and memory making is happening in one direction. There is, of course, the power. We have to not lose sight of the fact that power hierarchy and the points about who has access shapes the way in which these landscapes move. So that's where I think the question of who is the subaltern needs to be raised, right? And where is the subaltern? Because you constantly have to think in terms of whose memory is being put out there and whose memories are being recreated, or are they memories at all? Are they narratives, right? So I think this is I think I would hold on to this question in terms of thinking about specific instances. So I'm glad you pointed to the iteration of batik pattern. If you think about batik, and I mentioned batik, I think people from different parts of India would go towards different kinds of crafters as well. There is not one batik. And yet for me, batik in my childhood would have meant Indonesian batik that was very specific to that time. And my most recent PhD advisee was from Indonesia, and he's back there now. And he would show me fabric from Bate from Indonesia, and he said this is how it looks in different patterns. And the market has changed. If we're talking about Indonesian batik, because of the conversations with him and because my early exposure in my teens. And of course, when you've been there, my mother and her collection of batik. So the market has changed over the years. The way in which the design of batik happens, right, and also the fact that the UNESCO heritage batik in Indonesia is a very particular craft that has got the UNESCO heritage stamp. And so the batik is also a national symbol for them. And so batik has got taken different iterations and shifts in the offline space itself. So what is digitality? How does it come into play? Well, it's such a I mean, it depends, right? You saw that the Gen AI could not translate batik into batik, what we think of as batik. But the image of the batik came out pretty okay as a digital image in a certain way into Second Life, but in the digital. But even then, it's not kind of reflecting the practice of making batik, right? So is there a different word we would use for these different iterations is the question. So in terms of when digitality comes into play, I would be more interested in the question of what is digitality doing to the design of the actual fabric of the fabric, right? So when we went into the field back in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, I went with the NGO workers. Just would trail them. I'm not an expert in any of these, but trailing them. We went to a particular community that was producing weaving Gadwal saris, which was in I think in close to Hyderabad. Trying to think. And it was a community, and they were producing particular Gadwal saris, which didn't resonate with my understanding of Gadwal image from the. This was early 2000s and from the late 70s when my mother had bought me my first Gadwal sari, right? So, but the key there was the key where there is the key that differentiation of what Gadwal sari is the interweave of the silk and the cotton and at the pallu side. And that's a very specific skill that they have. And you obviously wouldn't call a digital artifact of the Gadwal as Gadwal when I'm making it in Second Life. But I did a whole series around trying to investigate what it means to have a Gadwal sari for an avatar. So calling it Gadwal Frenzy, and then moved it to the Gen AI. So what happens to these they're different, right? They're not the same thing. And over time they're also different. So the computer computer design possibilities. So when I sit at my loom, I can design my the pattern for the warp on the computer. Does that change the way in which the weaving is done? That's what I meant. The old technology is not old always. It's always shifting. It's always new. Um, so the computer abilities have in fact shifted the way in which the practices of these weaving happen, right? So even in terms of spinning yarn, there are e-spinners, and they are that have been made through the 3D printers. They are spinning wheels, small little spinning wheels. And how do these change the way in which yarn is made? So these are all material experiments that kind of make us think about what happens through the digital as well. Are these digital? I mean, if you are printing the parts of a spinning wheel, through a 3D printer using the digital software for 3D printing, is the spinning wheel itself. I don't have it here, it's in my home, but is the spinning wheel itself digital, or is it, plastics material, so tangible? So these are questions, these are different questions that are raised about, and the practices are what define what the craft is. We might conflate the different ways in which it looks. So I will show you the picture of the batik and say, this is batik, but it's not, right? We can go on and on about this, so I'll stop.
Yes, Parana, you can take the questions.
Yes, ma'am. I'll take the questions from here. I think Vishaka might have some issue with the laptop or something. Okay, so the next question is, um,
There's
you
one by
highlighted,
Amina. Yeah.
yes, Afrin. In what ways do digital storytelling and algorithmic mediation influence the art of re-narrating marginalized histories, and how can post-colonial feminist methodologies intervene in this process?
The question here is, do we know the marginalized histories? Who knows them? And who has access to the digital? I think you need to go back there. We can all go in and say because it's so cool to say I am representing the marginalized story, and then it's even extractive because the world wants to see what's called a marginalized story, and they'll pay you for it, or whatever pittance you get, or you get something for it. But who is narrating? I think it goes back to offline. Who has the access? Who wants to do it in what way? I mean, there are tools, but who's narrating is more centrally the question for me, and who's calling what marginalized. I hope that makes sense. I could say more, but I'll stop. It's coming in
Okay.
all the conversations.
Okay, ma'am. So on to the next question by Chetali. That's an interesting connection, Professor Gajala. The way AI, especially text-to-image models, reflects and often reinforce particular ideas of gender roles and identities is deeply tied to the politics of representation in cyberculture. What does this mean for people exploring non-normative sexual identities online when algorithms decide what's visible and what's flagged as inappropriate?
A very large question, and I'm sure there are people investigating this in a much deeper ways than I am. And again, this goes back to my answer to the previous one, where I said, people who are doing this, need to be doing it. But having said that, I tried to tweak that batik image in different ways by using different text, right? And I did get what stereotypically might be called drag or trans performance as well. And I don't know about flagging. I don't know who's flagging where, right? It's become a big mass of confusion nowadays. Where are we going to be flagged for what, where? So I don't know that AI platforms themselves are at all advanced enough to for anyone to be flagging things much. And though there is like the invisible digital labor of people who are trying to flag the toxicity around there as well. So I can't actually speak to um, when algorithms decide what's visible and what's flagged as inappropriate in these contexts. However, we know that this is happening, has been happening in social media for years, right? Where words are flagged or content is flagged as inappropriate when it is non-normative. And this has no doubt happened during protest movements as well, right? During even hashtag repeal 377 and such things. So flagging is an activity done by human beings based on how they are looking at what you produce. And flagging, in fact, is a way to control the algorithm as well, right? So and there's the practices engaged in by people who want to do what is called progressive work, and the people who want to do work in hate spaces are very similar in these spaces because the algorithms can be shifted in different ways. I don't know that that answers definitely everything you said, but again, it's something to think about.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. So I would like to take the last question. In 2023, an experiment with DAL E2 revealed um, sorry ma'am, I lost. Okay, DAL E2 revealed that when prompted to generated images of CEO or a leader, it overwhelmingly produces white men, while prompt for nurse or caregiver led to images of women. This reflects algorithmic patriarchy. So what interventions are needed to change these AI generated gender roles? And what are the dangers of allowing big tech controlled AI to dominate historical and cultural narratives?
Well, the dangers, we're seeing them every day. I also want to say that let's not limit our questions to calling it algorithm patriarchy. It's a great buzzword. You might get your PhD, you might get an article, but I think there's larger things at stake here. It'll still produce these kinds of images, by the way. And maybe it stopped producing 12 fingers where there should be 5, or 6 fingers where, or maybe it stopped some of those things, but it still does this. So what I'm trying to say is this is always the first thing that pops up bias in AI. Like, why do you expect it to be different? Most of the training material comes off of the internet and other places. I mean, where is there no bias? I mean, if you want to say something, I mean, even in physical, in a group when you're hanging out with your friends, and so those of you want to say something um, that seems to be counter, say, oh my God, you're a feminist. Oh, you use the F word. Oh my God, we don't need to engage with the feminazi. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing different, right? Where is it different? That hasn't changed in over 40 years. So you just the person who shouldn't be speaking speaks up, even if it is not about feminism, but it shouldn't be speaking socially in the social hierarchy. Speaks up is always shut down. I would say that I don't bother to speak in some spaces because I don't not care to be shut down. But we learn that as we grow older. Different ways to negotiate this. Is it important to say things in certain spaces? At the moment, AI is not that big, except that big politicians are using it for things. And it's actually because of the spread through social media that it becomes an issue. But AI itself is very, very basic. It's just not doing things. So I don't know what we expect from AI or Gen AI per se. So I hope that kind of answers, but none of my answers are definitive. I'm sorry, but I'm hoping you guys will give me answers. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With this, I would like to, this is the end of the question answer round. And I would like to thank you, Professor Radhika Gajjala, for your precious time and for this wonderful discussion. And we are really grateful for this detailed presentation that you have given us. So we are really grateful for this time. And also, I would like to thank our director, Professor Nishad Zaidi, and all the audience who have been patiently sitting for the entire day. I would really like to thank each and every one to be part of this conference and to make this a really great day. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, would you like to add
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Gajala. Uh, I mean, I'm really happy for things that you said, because all day, I mean, especially some papers, they made great assertions like AI is not like any other technology. AI is completely different. It is going to change everything, and so on and so forth. So I'm so happy that you said what you said, and
I'll tell you a secret. I'm sitting here in my son's house, and he's going to kill me if I say it. Because this is a software architect, and he says it's done nothing. It's not going anywhere. It's not
Yes,
even making money.
absolutely.
So
Yeah. And billions and trillions of dollars have already gone into it. So obviously, I mean, it is being created like I mean, presented like a big genie, market thing. So thank you so much. It was fascinating. And I must, thank all the rapporteurs, all the chairs, and all the research scholars, and definitely Shubhangi and Yusra and Farana and Chaitali and Alvira, all these people who have been here all day handling the pressure of, admitting people and dealing with all the technological hurdles. So thank you so much. It was fascinating day, long day, but very productive. So I'm very happy for everyone, and I would like to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, and thank you, Professor Gajala. This was really the best end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much,
thank you
and good
all.
night,
Thank you. I love
everyone.
this. Thank you. I hope to see the recordings for everyone.